don't mind. Go anyway. For real, at this point, I don't mind being a foreigner. In fact, actually, I've always said if I'm coming to Nigeria, I'm not coming. I won't come as a Nigerian. I will come. I will collect visa to enter Nigeria. For real.
The situation is really pathetic.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
I guess we are live, so I just want to wait a few minutes.
Yes.
And then
if we are live, let me act like human being. I can open my.
Yeah, we have about a minute to start. Okay, your videos are off.
They're not off. Just need to do something real quick. You know, when you're on live and Zoom, you have to be careful what you do.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone.
So good evening. A very, very, very good evening to everyone from wherever you're watching from. Good evening to those watching from Nigeria, and I hope the atmosphere is good wherever you're watching from. It's a cold evening in Lagos. It's really nice having everybody join another edition of this show. We have a few resource persons joining us to, of course, analyze the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I have a very, very senior colleague, Alfred Olufemi, who is a senior correspondent with Punch newspapers. I have Shegun Ogunshakin from the United States, who is a Pan-Africanist and somebody who has Nigeria, in I would say the best position in his mind. We also have a few people who will be joining us, members of civil societies in Nigeria, especially from the left. We're also expecting Abiodun, Sanusi, Ogundare, right, and some other people might just tune in. So basically, I think Commissioner and Alfred wants to say something in form of probably greetings. So I'll just let them have the floor and then do an introduction of what we are discussing today.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Hayola. I will want to go by that appellation and description. The senior, I'm not a senior colleague. We are colleagues. So thanks for having me, and I hope we have a fruitful conversation and a robust one. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Ayola, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank Ayola for having me yesterday for the great opportunity to learn, first of all, from everyone and be able to contribute my own quota and understanding to the OCG. We hope for a fruitful conversation. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course. We are now joined by Bright Ogundare, popularly known as Bob Marx. Bob is a Marxist, I think.
Yes.
Comrade,
Of course.
But Orthodox Marxists.
is that true?
Okay.
Orthodox Marxists.
Okay. All right. So let me start by saying that we have had lots of how would I put it? We have had lots of media reportage on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We have also have we've also had people, relate several opinions as to how they view the crisis. We have had what I call honest analysis and very, very dishonest analysis. Beyond dishonest, we have had what I call a very, very porous ideological analysis. It doesn't even have to be ideological, a very porous, truthful analysis of the situation. And that's particularly owing to the fact that many people want to discuss this crisis from when Russia actually started its military offensive in Ukraine. And that I would imagine it's about 2 weeks now. I think tomorrow would make it 2 weeks since Russia invaded Ukraine, as the media would put it. So a lot of people, you know, their opinions on those crises are formed by the fact that, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, Western media or the media generally has hammered on the fact that Russia is about to invade Ukraine, and then 2 weeks ago, Russia invaded Ukraine, which is a violation on the sovereignty of Ukraine as a country. And of course, we know that sanctions are followed very seriously. We also know that the West is currently on, I wouldn't call it a rampage, but I think that's the nearest word to it, to isolate Russia from the rest of the world. I would let Bright go first to give us some contextual analysis of this crisis. Bright, how does all this appear to you? Bright, did you hear me?
No, the network has been terrible.
Oh,
But I
okay.
think I got you were talking about
hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, I was talking about the crisis and the fact that people have been analyzing the crisis from about 2 weeks ago when Russia began the military offensive, ignoring the fact that the crisis had existed for almost a decade. And, there has been lots of issues, coming out from the crisis since it began in 2014. So I quickly wanted to have your thoughts generally, how does the entire thing, the military invasion, the recognition of the separatist republics and the likes, how does it appear to you in first?
Yes, I think I got that. Now, sometimes we don't need to analyze history from a recent perspective. I feel analyzing history from a perspective of 2 weeks is actually so short for us to get a concise historical perspective. I feel we need to the thing about history is this. It's the fact that it might happen decades ago, but it still has impacts on the decisions and the choices we make now. So now, if we want to analyze the Ukrainian, Russia crisis, we have to first of all go to the end of the Soviets. That's the dissolution of the Soviets after under Gorbachev, and then the fact that there was an agreement that NATO is not going to expand to the east. We should remember that NATO was created specifically as an opposition to the Soviets. Now, when the Soviets was dismantled, there was supposed to be a corresponding commitment from the West that, okay, we are not going to expand towards this. But unfortunately, after the dissolution of the Soviet, the West actually had this feeling of being in charge. So they just did a lot of things, started expanding, because as at that time there were no there were no alternative world center of power. But now that we have the Chinese and the Russians are now probably back into the competition, you tend to expect this kind of problems.
Thank you very much, Bright, for that very brief comment. I wouldn't want to leave Alfred out of the conversation, even though his role may tend to, be specific to the media coverage. Well, let me quickly ask Alfred, do you think the media has been fair? Do you think, okay, so I understand that. I mean, I'm a journalist, and I would be the first to admit that Western media plays a specific role in global politics. And that, of course, is more or less like an annex of the West military and, of course, imperialist, how would I put it, intentions. But I would not go directly to that. I want to ask you about the Nigerian media that serves as a source of informing over 200 million people about what's going on in the West. Would you say that the media has been very fair in their reportage of this crisis?
It's not.
Okay, thanks very much, Ayola. The problem we have is that media itself is a product of democracy. And, using a democratic tool for a complicated issue like this, I mean, involving communist, countries that are aversive towards democracy, it can be complicated. But I don't want to go into the politics of the issue. I want us to look at it from the Nigerian media you mentioned, just part of the chain. I mean, the lowest part, in the sense that we rely I don't think there's any Nigerian media that has a correspondent in Ukraine or in Russia as we speak. So we rely mostly on AFP, BBC, CNN, and the likes. So you cannot, and when you look at the formation of the media, the Western media holds, like you said, affects the global politics. So Nigerian media is just a victim of these circumstances. And the best we can do is just to reference BBC, reference CNN. But away from that, I think we have platforms that are doing a little bit, they are going critical in the sense that they now put perspective to this. An average Nigeria does not know what has happened in Ukraine, Russia in the last 2 decades. I mean, thanks to Bright, who gave us some historical background to it. But an average Nigerian wants to know, Ed, that the Russia has started an offensive in Ukraine. And, it appeals to their emotion. People are dying in a war. But to better put it in a perspective, we all know that the Russian government has a genuine interest. I mean, when you talk about the truthful analysis and the dishonest one, so the Russian government has an interest, the Western government as well has an interest. And then in between these two interests, we have Ukraine. So it is as complicated as you can imagine. Let me just stop there for now.
Thank you very much. For Comrade Shegun, do you want to say something on how you think the media has handled this crisis?
Thank you, Comrade Ayola. In my own opinion, I would say, first of all, do we even have a media? Who controls the media? Who owns the media? The only thing we have today is the opportunity of social media that we have today, in which you and I don't necessarily need to wait on the mainstream to get the news that we need. Sometimes we even have the news as first-hand news even before this mainstream media comes up with their own story. This is what I'm trying to say. No, there's nothing we can say or we can do to make any change about the media issue because we don't control it. What we control is what we are doing right now, all of us right here. That's what we have to control. But the mainstream media cannot be, we can't ask the question if what they're doing is right or wrong, because how do I put it? The source of the problem is being controlled by the media. I don't know if I'm making sense. So if the owner of the media is in charge of the problem, so how do you ask if what they are doing is right or wrong? Basically, what I'm trying to say is they cannot do right. That's my own summary. In my opinion, the media cannot do right. But the benefit that we have today is you and I can bring up our own perspective, our own understanding, what you and I have learned, and push it out there through this, YouTube and what we have today. So then, in my own opinion, secondly, I would love to talk about the war itself. In as much as there's two sides to the whole coin. You understand?
We'll come to the war. We'll come to the war in a moment. I want, Bright is going on and off. I don't know if he can hear me. You are muted, Bright.
Okay, it's the network, actually. It's the network. Yeah. But I'm trying to sort it out.
Of course, I'm sorry about that. So let us do a very brief background to this war or crisis, whichever one you may like to call it. We'll Bright quickly, go ahead to give us a brief background of the crisis from when NATO signed an agreement with the now defunct Soviet Union in I think 1991, not to expand further towards its region and ex-members, and then down to 2014 when the United States actually sponsored a Nazi coup in Ukraine, and then the secessionist agitation. Don't let me put words into your mouth. Would you go ahead to quickly give us a summary?
Okay, so basically what we have is a case of the fact that the history of Russia and Ukraine had always been interwoven. What do I mean by being interwoven? Even before the era of the Soviets, there had always been a crisis about Russia and Ukraine. They are like like a writer will put it. They said prison. The writers called his book "Prisoner of Geography." That is, there are some countries that are just prisoners of geography. Geography has bonded them together. They have to cope together. So Ukraine and Russia had always been together, being close to each other, and then they've had several occasions of skirmishes and fights. And then under the Soviets, they were together. And then at the dissolution of the Soviets, there was actually an agreement that, okay, yes, we are dissolving. Now, the Soviet comprises of countries like Russia, Estonia, Lithuania, Armenia. Okay, we are dissolving. But you must give us assurance that, okay, being that the Eastern Europe will be our sphere of influence in geopolitics. There's what we call sphere of influence, because they are power centers. Now, the Americans have their own sphere of influence. There's a Monroe Doctrine that states that no other foreign power, no other strong power has a right to intervene in any event on the American continent. That is North, South, and America and the Caribbean. So this was what Russia themselves asked for. Now, China, for example, considers Southeast Asia as their own sphere of influence, So each of these world power centers consider some parts of the world as their sphere of influence, where they don't expect any challenge, and that was what the Russians expect of expect that was the assurance that the Russians were expecting the US to give them, which the US gave, but they didn't follow, they didn't really stay committed to it. Don't forget that even Russia, the Soviet also had its own alliance at that time, which was the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact was like the Soviet alternative to NATO, but the Warsaw Pact was disbanded. The Soviet Union was disbanded. But the first person that broke the respect for the Russian sphere of influence was President Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton actually admitted some few countries into NATO, and then in 2008 there was an open invitation to Georgia and Ukraine to join NATO. And that was actually what led to the invasion of Russia in 2008. And then subsequently, the crisis of Putin also led to the Putin actually invading Georgia. So sorry, please, the network is having issues. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Bright. Please go
Okay.
ahead.
So can you give me a moment so I can sort out and change the network?
Yes, please go ahead and do that.
Yes.
We are now joined by Comrade Kazim, who is also a member of, I think, the Socialist Workers League, if I'm not wrong. But in any way, he's also a Marxist and a member of the left in Nigeria. And also, we are joined by Dr. Jide Johnson, a senior lecturer in journalism at the Nigerian Institute of Journalism. So basically, what Bright was trying to summarize is that there is an agreement between Russia and NATO countries, led by the United States, of course, that they will not expand towards Russia and its former members. Of course, that agreement was before. Comrade Charles, did you want to say something? Okay. So, that agreement was before the US sponsored a Nazi coup in Ukraine in 2014. Now, following that coup, three republics, started agitating for secession, one of which is Crimea, Lugansk, and Donetsk. So these three countries, of the three countries, Crimea sent a formal request to Russian parliament to be part of Russia. Russian parliament accepted the request, and Crimea became part of Russia. Now, let's take this conversation from that aspect. Alfred will agree with me that the media has continued to call what happened in Crimea an annexation. They will say Russia annexed Crimea, which this to me would appear like a deliberate decision to not recognize the right of the Crimea people to secession. Because secession, self-determination, as we call it, is a global human right. So when the media continues to address what happened in Crimea as annexation, do you think this is fair, given that it is public record that those people actually sent a formal request to the Russian parliament? Just before Alfred comments, welcome, Dr. Jide Johnson. We are looking at how the media has covered this Russia-Ukraine crisis. If it has been fair, because what we have seen mostly is the coverage of the crisis from 2 weeks ago, when Russia actually invaded Ukraine, without very honest analysis to the background of the crisis since 2014. Dr. Johnson, you have the floor in a moment, just after Alfred makes his comment.
Okay. The choice of words, for instance, I understand, I noticed you were struggling between choice of crisis and war. And this is a replica of what the media has created. some of these words are deliberately used to justify. I was speaking with a lawyer, is based in Kenya, and we chatted, and I mean, this Russia-Ukraine discussion popped up, and I asked him, barrister, you think this is justified? And he said, compared to what the US did in Afghanistan, I mean, the Russian government is not justified, that you cannot place both on the same pedestal. And, people can go on and argue and argue and argue. And this is the role of media, beyond putting out information, is to also put things in context and perspectives. And don't let us forget, in 2014, before there was a ceasefire, we had the Minsk agreement. And some of these issues were highlighted in the Minsk agreement. So, coming out now, one of the things in the Minsk agreement is that, the Ukrainian government will amend the constitution, to further put things better. And also the recognition of some of these areas as sovereign states. So if Ukraine is fighting for its sovereignty, and another part of Ukraine, wants to succeed, and Ukraine is stopping that from exhibiting the sovereignty, it's, complication. You want to exhibit your own rights, and at the same time, you are stopping others from, and the Western media has propagated this clearly. And so it is so hard. Sometimes when switching on to CNN, I just tell them to turn it off in the office, or sometimes BBC, because they consistently peddle this narrative. And Dr. Jide Johnson is an expert in the media. There's what we call a media psychology. And there's a way that when you repeat this broadcast, it affects the psyche of the listeners in a way. And these are things that inform the bias that we have today. And I find apart from the whole issue, the media is stuck in what I call the multi-layered effect. And we have the media bias, we have the social media hysteria too. For instance, GW fact-checked some videos, some clips that were deliberately sent out to misinform the public about the Russia-Ukraine situation. And some of these videos date back to 2010, some to 2017, some to 2000. It's so ridiculous.
Some of them are even actually America's
yes,
in Iraq. Yes.
In Iraq. So when we now, and the media is vulnerable these days. Gone are those days when we were dealing with the radio. Don't let us forget that the radio played a major role in the Second World War. Everybody wanted access to the radio because it was affordable and accessible. Everybody had the radio in their house. So the German government wanted a radio, and they were all sponsoring propaganda. And even in 2014, don't let us forget, propaganda were flying around about what Russia did in Crimea. So it is very important that media, I know we are stuck in the bias, not just the organization bias, individuals too, because I work for an organization, Ayola, you work for an organization. If we differ on some issues, it will reflect in our reporting. And there's also the dilemma of ethics, in the sense that journalists don't have a content of their own. We only report people. But, objectivity is subjective. My choice of experts is based on my own bias. Yes, experts will come on my show and say this, and that. And I will quote them that this is what they just said. But in the real sense of it, do they represent the reality? So that's when the gatekeeping rule comes in again. Okay, before you bring people to analyze issues, what is their stand? Do they have any non-disclosure, or they have affiliation to any organization, or some of them are emotionally attached to the situation? Fine, people are dying in Ukraine. And I've mentioned this several times, that the Russian government could have averted the situation, just like the Western world could have averted that situation. Because this is just a simple case of, we had an agreement and there's a breach of agreement. So now trying to paint it as a case of Russia against the whole world is unfair. And I do, like I said, I'm tempted to go into the politics, but I don't want. I just want to stay on the media. So let me just hold on for now.
Yes, so I know Comrade Segun is itching that we go the segments where we talk about how this war affects Africa, but we'll do that in a moment. Dr. Johnson, the unreported parts of this crisis, the fact that Ukraine broke the Minsk agreement, there has been two Minsk agreements, Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. The unreported parts of the crisis that Ukraine broke the two Minsk agreements, the unreported part of the crisis that Ukraine has actually been shelling the separatist regions, that's Donetsk and Lugansk, with heavy artillery in the last 8 years. This is the United Nations, UNICEF now. I cannot place my hand on the full meaning. Did a report that what Ukraine has done to Donetsk and Lugansk in almost a decade has caused a humanitarian crisis in those two separatist regions due to lack of water. Ukraine did cut water supply from civilian population areas, affecting schools, affecting hospitals, which that in itself is a war crime. And this is not justifying Russia's invasion. This is putting things in perspective. Dr. Johnson, do you think it's fair that the media, especially in Nigeria, hasn't said much about the beginnings of this crisis and what Ukraine has done to the Donetsk and Lugansk people, who are now known as the LPR and DPR, if I'm correct?
Well, the unfortunate situation is that Ukraine finds itself in the midst of the politics of the West and the East, and Ukraine is like a pawn on a chessboard that is being used by the West to score global attention.
Dr. Johnson, do you want to turn on your video? I mean, it's fine if you don't want to, but it just makes the presentation very okay.
Make your presentation. Just give me a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, I'm done. All right. Yes, I'm ready for you. All right. So, as I was saying, they just found themselves in the midst of the pawn. I like what your first speaker, when you started the session, said, having an understanding of history, which gives you the right perspective of commenting on this particular issue. Don't forget that Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Republic, and Ukraine happens to be the nuclear site, the powerhouse of Russian nuclear power when it was still part and parcel of United Soviet Republic. However, in the last 20, 30 years, we have witnessed Ukraine's attempt to be part and parcel of NATO, which is an arch rival to Russia, and that has created problems. But the real issue is Putin is trying to reclaim the lost glory of Russia, trying to perpetuate himself in power, and is using these moves to sustain himself. Don't forget that Putin has manipulated the constitution of Russia to give himself the leverage to be the president of Russia as long as he wants it. Domestically, Russia is going through a lot of crisis, economic crisis, inflation, and the rest of it. However, what could shift the attention of an average Russian to what they are going through domestically is for them to paint a larger picture of having the old modern Russia back. That's on one side. Two, using the excuse that there are separatist group in Russia. We knew how Russia treated.
Just very quickly, just before you continue, Dr. Johnson, I recognize your very valid point about Russia's economic crisis, which has been, in my own opinion anyway, overtly exaggerated by Western media. But are you concerned also that just before the West, the US and the UK began to blow on about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, President Biden was also having very, very low approval ratings, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, was also almost going to face trial for his violation of COVID-19 protocols. It would appear that it's not only Russia that has reasons to find a distraction for their citizens.
Don't forget that when...
I just wanted to make that point.
Don't forget that talking about your media narrative, it's, for example, I don't listen to CNN News alone. I watch CNN, I watch Fox News to have a balance of the American political narrative. But however, CNN itself as a media organization existed and gained international limelight as a result of their involvement and their ability to transmit Operation Desert Storm in 1991, when America went and rescued Kuwait from the stranglehold of Iraq. So CNN, the American media is part and parcel of the establishment. You see, that's why I'm saying that I started with the opening statement that Ukraine is just a pawn in global and national problems that leaders are facing. If you situate what is happening in Russia now with what Russia is doing, and you situate that with what Tayyip Erdogan did with the courts in Turkey, or with what the Jews are doing to the Palestine, you discover that the different way the media reported the issue is different. The perspective they give to these stories is different to how these issues are reported, or how Russia on its own refused the Chechen people, the separatist group, for them to separate from Russia because they wanted to pull out of Russia. There's no justification for war in modern times. There's no justification for it. And there's no justification for what Ukraine has been doing to the Donbas region and the Lviv region. However, you situate that home. Let's bring that home with self-agitation for Biafra in Nigeria. What do you think will be the reaction, or what has been the reaction of Nigerian government to self-determination or self-agitation for Biafra? So it is beyond those self-agitation. It's about perpetuating the deep state. The deep state does not exist only in United States of America, in China. It exists in Russia. It exists in Turkey. It exists all over the world. You see all these actors, Joe Biden, Putin, Boris Johnson, and the rest of them. Even the president, Emmanuel Macron, if you listen to the news, Emmanuel Macron spoke with Russian president for 1.5 hours. 1 hour 45 minutes. This self-survival politics for their own self is a distraction to his crisis at home. For Joe Biden, the military-industrial complex in America must look for something to sustain the government they foist on the American people. The failures of Biden's administration has to be distracted with a global crisis. That's my take. That's my take on it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson. We have Comrade Kazim in a moment, but just before we do that, I want to ask Alfred and Dr. Johnson a very, very sincere question. I'm losing my words right now, but really, we have seen the recruitment of child soldiers in Ukraine. We've seen minors going to, what is it called, to learn how to use weapons dressed in military gears, which actually is a war crime. But the media is painting this as an act of heroism. That's a gesture that the media didn't extend to the Palestinians when, the Israel apartheid state, even as it currently lays siege on them, it's not the same gesture they extended to children in Afghanistan, in Libya, and in over 100 countries that the United States has invaded. Quickly, Dr. and Alfred, do you want to comment on this? Well, and yes, one more thing that I would add to that is, okay, maybe we'll take that first, then we'll take my next question on the media perspective.
I think it was Alfred, or I don't know, one of your speakers that was talking about media bias and talking about how your bias influence your media selection, and the perspective and the narrative which you give to the story. For example, what was the bias that the media said concerning Donald Trump? They said there will be the emergence of Third World War, whereas Donald Trump is the only American president in the last 30, 40 years that did not start a single war, that pulled Americans out of existing war that they are fighting. So the bias exists, and is a function of narrative. Is a function of perspective. How do you see a cup? Is it half full or half empty? Now, we have seen over the time how, let's take, for example, Africans are derided and insulted every time they play a football game. Sponsorship for teams were not withdrawn, but Zuma kicked a cat, and he kicked a cat, and then you see the hysteria by Adidas canceling his contract. You see the hysteria. Some people saying he should go to jail and the rest of it. Because of what? Because of the pigmentation of his skin. So we have seen that the way, whatever affects the interest of the West is negative. Whatever promotes their interest is positive. So to them, recruiting minor into fighting war in Ukraine is heroism. But doing that in Palestine, doing that in Syria, doing that in Sudan, doing that in Libya,
terrorism.
It's terrorism. It's terrorism.
Sorry,
Alfred, let me just tie it up with this. Just like we have it at home, you know how many years it took Nigerian government to term bandits terrorists. There's a difference between the term terrorist and bandits. So it's a function of what you want to achieve and the perspective with which you want to give to the people.
Thank you. Okay, yes. Alfred, please, let's hold on for Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioner, I think, and let me buttress my brother's point. I think the conversation itself, and I'm sorry if correct me if I'm wrong, I think the conversation itself is a bit wrong. And in this perspective, this is what I'm saying. We cannot pick a side. We cannot say somewhere is wrong, someone is right in this situation. If I go by what my brother has analyzed so far, there's problem on both sides. You cannot turn towards Russia and say Russia is okay. No. Neither can you say Ukraine is fine or the West. Because when you look at the whole war, all in all, who does it benefit at the end of the day? It's still the same set of people. If Russia is winning, who is going to win? Putin and his friends, not basically the main Russian people. If Ukraine is winning, who is going to benefit? The West. So this problem is, for me, the conversation should be between good or bad. If you are having a conversation between good or bad, that can be easily explained. But we're having a conversation between who is right or who is wrong about the media, which the media itself, like I said initially, none of us has control over the media. The people that owns the media are the same people creating this problem. So how do we say they are right or wrong? I don't know if I'm making any sense. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you very much, Commissioner. You make a whole lot of sense. Alfred, I know you want to go, but let me just add this question just before you speak. Now, we've seen the West ban Russian news outlets or news outlets that are tagged as Russian. Now, we know that whether these news outlets are owned, there is this, worldview that the media is state-owned or state-controlled in Russia, which is not an absolute take, or which is not a very, very honest take, in the whole sense, given that there are news stations in Russia that one would want to imagine that they are anti-Putin. They have spoken against this war. They have spoken against his economics and the likes. But social media giants, Facebook and Twitter, which are basically headquartered in the West, have a culture of branding, any media organization that comes from that part of the world as Russian state-affiliated media, China state-affiliated media. And now we are seeing that the West is banning these newspapers and television stations. Do you think that that is fair at all? I think we just lost Alfred.
Yeah, I
Alfred,
want
if
to
you're
be sure.
back,
Yeah, I want to be
yes.
sure it's not my network. Is it my network?
No, your network is clear. I can hear you loud and clear. Just that I can't hear you now. Well, okay, so if I can't hear Alfred, I think I'll direct that question to Bright, and then maybe Dr. Johnson would like to put a touch on it. So we've seen how these newspapers and television stations are affiliated with this Russia states or China. They've been, profiled before now, and in the case of this war, they are being directly, shut off social media. Would you think that that's fair? Do you think that that in itself does not constitute an attack on press freedom?
Yeah, under any guise, there should not be gagging of the press, whether they are saying the right thing or the wrong thing, because now the world is a world of perspectives. Now, the problem we have been having historically, whether it's in capitalist societies or socialist societies, is the fact that whoever is in power, whoever owns the power, wants to control the access of people to information. Now, the capitalist societies, for example, wants to control being the fact that they are business, the media entrepreneurs, they want to control the access of people to information. So they control the press to be able to guarantee their profit. Now, in societies that have termed themselves socialists, in China and the likes, these people have also gagged the media under the guise of, if we allow the media to function freely, there will be infiltration by imperialist forces. So all over history, they have always been the gagging of the press, and this itself is very, very dangerous. Now, when you look at the American society, you understand the current American society, you understand why it is dangerous to gag the press. Now, the American press now, it has become so much of a comedy that I can tell you that this is what I can hear something and I will tell you this is what CNN will say, this is what Fox will say. Why? Because we already know what they are for. And then if everybody is trying to prevent people from listening to informed perspectives, so what the West is trying to do is to make sure that people who are not that are in the West and in allied societies like in Africa, where they have the presence, are denied access to the perspective of Russia. And this itself is dangerous because it does not bring the triumph of good over evil, as they want to say. Rather, it creates a polarized world where everybody become increasingly convinced that their perspectives are right, even when they are wrong. Because why do you need to gag me if I'm not right? So the gagging of the media do not solve any problem on the long run. It only creates a polarized society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Alfred, just before we lost you, we were talking about how the social media giants, mostly headquartered in the West, have profiled media stations, newspapers, and television stations in countries like Russia and China. It's very hard to see media houses from there not branded when you see them on Twitter as Russian state affiliated media, China state affiliated media. And in case of this invasion, as we see, the West has now shut them off completely by banning them. I was asking if does not directly constitute an attack on press freedom. I think Alfred will be back to answer that question. Comrade Kazim, Comrade K, do you want to quickly unmute your mic and give us your perspective on some of these issues that we have raised before we quickly talk about what it means for Africa?
Good evening, comrades. Is Kazim, member of Campaign for Workers Alternative, Nigerian session of International Marxist Tendency, IMT. For those who have been following the Marxist position on this line, we have been very consistent to say that in war, the first casualty is not even the people, it's the truth. The truth is inevitably going to be the first casualty. And that's exactly what we are saying. To expect fog of wars to still expose truth, to defend truth, is like expecting lion to start eating grass. The only method Marxists use to penetrate through the fogs of series of lies that normally confront us during a complicated situation like this, and what is one of the most complicated situations for humanity, is for us to identify different interests that are involved. I think in almost all our analysis, we mixed up things. We need to first identify what are the different interests in the forefront of these complexities. First of all, how do we expect the Russians? No, when I say Russia, I'm talking of the working class, average Russian. How do we expect them to respond to a NATO force just at their corridor, very close, sharing the border with Russia? What kind of feeling do we expect them to share, with that kind of possibility? NATO is not an economic bloc; it's a military arrangement. When it formed in 1946, the jubilation that followed the collapse of USSR in 1991 was to the extent that NATO thought, that there's now absolute domination of the whole world. That the whole world cannot be turned to the same way you have Africa, that they can just make a phone call to your president and decide on what they should do, and anybody who goes against this, they remove that person, without anybody blinking any form of fire. But they made mistake. For many articles were written in 1991. I don't know whether Comrade can still remember a write-up by Fukuyama declaring the end of the world. That with the collapse of USSR, it means the absolute domination of NATO, a Western imperialist. But we wrote to challenge him that rather than it bringing peace, it's going to exacerbate the division. Nationalist movement will increase because it's not, humanity is not divided on the basis of region you built around them. It's more on the classes. And that's exactly what we are currently seeing. The Russians naturally have feeling that a NATO, which is correct, a NATO close to them means turning them to Libya, to Nigeria, to any form of Africa, and they responded appropriately. What Putin just did was to exploit that sentiment. Putin exploited the feeling, the genuine, honest feeling of average Russians. Comrade Ajide, who earlier said that Putin rating, in fact, at the point in time, it was as low as 30. It was terrible at a period. But with this, him jumping into this, exploiting this mode, presently, from what I read last week, it started about 70. It jumped up. He rose, developed this feeling and should stand firmly, on the shoulder of the feeling of an average Russian. So with this one, he is able to now advance, his own personal interest. Putin. The question is Putin genuinely defending the interest of the Russians? That's the second question that we need to ask ourselves. If you see how Putin currently rules Russia, along with his oligarchy colleagues, you clearly understand that this is clearly exploiting the situation. You can't put average Russia in the condition you have put them and claim that it's still their interest you are defending when you have gone to Ukraine. Lenin said many times that war is a continuation of your domestic policy. What are the policies of Putin at home? Under no condition should we fall into that trap. That's what Putin is actually doing in Ukraine, is in defense of the Russians' interest. You can't defend their interest when you are doing everything to ruin, to put more and more Russians into poverty at home. And that's why our comrades, Marxists in Russia. We're in the forefront of a campaign against the war. They are in the forefront of mobilizing Russians. The challenge of mobilizing Russians against Putin is the responsibility of our comrades, and working class in Russia. But NATO's interest that the US, the UK are also defending, we completely of anybody this of these rogues, of those who are presently profiteering. What is the exact interest of US, in this whole arrangement? It's clear, it's obvious. The same way they will go to Mali, remove a president, put another one there. They will go to there was a time in Cote d'Ivoire, they directly involved France directly got involved. They move a president, put another one there. The same thing they want to turn Russia to. But unfortunately for them, it's excessively difficult. Therefore, in all these crossfires, the interest of the Ukrainian, average Ukrainians, the interest of average Russians are stake. But if you want to see how this kind of war ought to be fought, if Marxists have been the one directing this kind of a war, we should just go back to 1917-19, when this same Ukraine was gradually becoming part of the USSR. It wasn't it wasn't army mobilized from Russia that actually fought the nationalists with the Ukrainian people before they finally signed to join the USSR. The Ukrainians themselves were the one who did. I think we were the one in charge. The President Zelensky of Ukraine, the responsibility of the we have seen how he has also mismanaged the situation. We have seen how the interest of the oligarchy in Ukraine is what is also defending. But the responsibility of dealing with him is for the Ukrainians. It's not for anybody external to actually defend and deal with that situation. But ultimately, with Putin at the end of Russia, Zelensky at the end of Ukraine, we can't see that solidarity that we enjoyed in 1919. And that's exactly where the position of the Marxists actually sits. We are not looking forward to a period when the truth will be told. It can never be told, but it's for us to defend our own specific interests, which I think is the key in this situation. Sorry for taking such a long...
No problem at all. Thank you very much, Comrade Kazim. Okay, Alfred, do you want to quickly say something if your network is clear now? The question before we lost you is that, did you get the question the other time before you left? It was about how the West is shutting off Russian newspapers and television stations. Before now, these newspapers and TV stations have been profiled and branded. You can hardly see their social media handles without seeing Russia state-affiliated media, China state-affiliated media, and stuff like that. But in the case of those four, they have now been completely shut off social media by the West. Do you not think that this in itself is an attack on press freedom?
Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah, so before we got to the question of shutting down of the media, I think we were discussing whether one is good or one is bad and all of that. And my position has always been that both sides have genuine concerns. Ukrainians have right to their sovereignty. The Russians can protect their territorial integrity as well. So, and they have to, that's the first responsibility of any serious government, protection of its people. And I mean, we've had perspectives on the personal interest of Putin, and that's by the way. So I want to liken this to, it's more or less like the secessionist agitations we have in Nigeria. But let's look at this hijab crisis in Nigeria at the moment. It is very difficult to take a side because the schools we talk about are formerly owned by missionaries. And there's also part of the constitution that says Nigeria is a secular state, that we are not bound by any religions. That's why the kite of Sharia is not flying in the southern part of the country. So yes, you can put on anything. We have the freedom to wear anything. And at the same time, how do we then marry it? Marry that same part of the constitution that says there's freedom to associate, there's freedom to do whatever, and the right of these missionaries to their school. So if you look at it, it's very complicated to pick a side, just like this case we were discussing. So then let's move to shutting down of the media. We cannot say, because even when we talk about the spread of fake news, the solution has never been that the government will control the media. We believe that the media should be self-regulatory. And how are we self-regulatory? But that's why we have organizations like AFP that does fact checks. I think we have the Bawa in Nigeria. We have a couple of fact-checking initiatives in Nigeria too. And what are these organizations doing? They are not coming out to label or propose to the government to shut down an organization. They just pick this reporting. This particular reporting has gone viral. It's misleading. Then they tell the public it's misleading. The onus is now on these same social media giants like Facebook that are coming to the same velocity they have given the fake news. Then the fact check too should be given the same the publicity by this. But it has never been the situation. What they do is they put the fact check down, and the fake news keeps increasing metrically. So shutting down the media has never been the solution to either fake news or biased representation or even propaganda. So what we can actually do is to make it open, like one of the facilitators said, is to make it open. By the time we have divergent views, it makes the opinion of an average person informed. You have an informed perspective, because look at, if I'm a newspaper editor now, what Comrade Kazim has said is enough for me to generate a lot of story ideas around this diaspora reporting. Okay, that's what is Putin's interest. By the time you put all of this to the press, to the public, we won't have a big opinion, because by the time you engage an average Nigeria, what you don't know is that Russia is planning to use nuclear weapon on, and humans are going to go into extinction. That's the average Nigeria. But when we have all of this informed perspective, we are able to make informed decisions. So I think I will stop there. That's all I have to say.
Yes, thank you. So, yes, let me give Dr. Johnson a moment to quickly comment on the question I asked Alfred. Do you not think that shutting off Russian newspapers and television stations is an attack, irrespective of wherever it is coming from, on press freedom? You are muted, Doctor.
The press freedom has always been under attack. If you look at the evolution of the press as an institution, there were various attempts by those in power to shut the press. That led to what we call the theory of the press. We talk about communist, Soviet communist theory of the press, authoritarian, libertarian. You've seen an attempt by the press, even in Western world, to shut down dissenting opinion. You saw what happened in Canada. You saw what happened in the United States of America concerning the 2020 election and the outcome of 2020 election, whereby dissenting view, which brought about the emergence of authority. The press has become part and parcel of the authority. The press, there's no way you can separate CNN as the mouthpiece of the Democratic Party in America, or separate Fox News as the mouthpiece of the Republican Party in the United States of America. So the press has become part and parcel of the authority. And there's no way you can deny the fact that Twitter, Facebook, and the rest of it are part and parcel of the Democratic Party establishment in the United States of America. Solving problems does not require you gagging the press. In actual sense, the issue of fact-checking, and who fact-check the fact-checker? Who fact-check the fact-checker? So we have seen that emergence. And for those of you that are on this platform, because this is the first time I'll be sitting in the midst of comedy, that I'll be a little bit comfortable, because if you call, the moment you call yourself comedy, I become uncomfortable, because there is a perspective with which I have with that ideology. But all of us are in the media industry. There's a particular theory that speaks into what is going on now. It's called the political economic theory of the media. Now, whoever controls what we are seeing is just about the economic interest and survival of all of this. I didn't know whether it's the publisher of this magazine. I can't recall his name now. One of your presenters that was making reference to 1991 and talking about what Bulama published. Who wins in this war? It is not the average Ukrainian people. It is not even the Russian people that wins, whichever way it goes. It is still the oligarchy in Eastern Bloc or the capitalists in the Western Bloc that wins, because one, they will sell their ammunition. Two, they will make money from the sales of oil. So it is not about the people. It is just about protecting the interest of the establishment. And the press, unfortunately, has become part and parcel of the establishment. The moment you go against the establishment, the first attempt that is made, whether in America or in Russia or what have you, is for you to be shut down. It's for you to be shut down. We saw how a sitting president was knocked off of Twitter. We saw how the truckers in Canada, just recently, the truckers in Canada, their GoFundMe account, their crowdfunding account was denied. So I will end with this. Time magazine published an article, I think 3 or 4 years ago, and it said the emergence of strong men, the emergence that democracy is dead. And we are now seeing the emergence of strong men, people that are becoming larger than the society, that are becoming bigger than the institution. And we have seen that in Brazil, with Bolsonaro in Brazil, Tayyip Erdogan in Turkey, Chairman Xi in China, Boris Johnson, you saw the crisis Boris Johnson had. There was lockdown, yet Boris Johnson was flouting and breaking the law. The COVID rule, was busy having party. Same with Joe Biden in America. So that's just my take.
Yes. Thank you very much. I would like to mention that, in my own opinion, of course, while your points are very valid, I think that it's unfair that the West would quickly, brand journalism from countries they dislike as state affiliated to automatically describe them as propaganda. It's actually an insult to mean that those people, without their own permission or approval, are incapable of, investigation and news writing. And
CNN not state affiliated. Yes. CNN not state affiliated.
Now, Comrade Segun, yes. We have actually now come to your moment. In all of this.
Hold on. I need to come into what everybody has been saying all along. Because we are here talking about media having sanctioned media, not sanctioned media. The question is this: I want to ask you questions from everybody. Who owns the press? Is the press actually independent? In the first question, maybe the ideology of press is independent, but in the real sense, is the press actually independent? Let me ask a question, sir. Ayola, do you remember when we started? Please remind me. Campus
trackers.
Campus trackers. Thank you. Why? Campus tracker is meant to be another media organization, if I'm right or wrong. Correct. Ayola, are you with me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. But the question is, as of now, we couldn't really go too far. Why? We don't have the fund. So that tells you that if somebody comes today and give us the fund to make Campus Tracker a global media platform, who controls that media? If we want the funds.
That's what Kama said. That's why Kama said the means of production, the political economic theory of the media. That's why I want all of you to go and read it, particularly those of you that are comrade, for you to understand. Whoever controls the means of production controls the society. And whoever controls the means of thought controls the thing. Now, check all the global media. Who are the controllers? Who are the owners of the media? Even the ones you have in any society, it has become part and parcel of the establishment. And that's just it.
My brother, that's why I'm saying that the question itself, it's wrong. We cannot be asking this question because the foundation of the whole situation is messed up already. We are not in control. You and I are not in control of anything. We have no financial implication to any of these problems. Like I said the other time, the war in Russia and Ukraine, at the end of every situation, Now Ukrainian people will suffer the whole thing and Russian people. The rich in Russia and the rich in Ukraine and the rich in the West will still remain rich at the end of this situation. Ayola, I don't know if you were with you joined that Twitter space. I was always talking about Russia, this Russian-Ukrainian issue at some point, sometimes last week. The guy was talking about the amount of money Russia will make because of the high price of gas right now. Even here in America, we know how much we are paying for gas today. Russia is making millions with all your sanctions going on Iran because they are still supplying oil to other countries, to a lot of European countries. My point is here, these conversations for me, and this is personal opinion, I don't usually talk much about it because, in my own opinion, we are still picking the problem on the surface. Every of this problem, none of us here have any control because we have no strong contribution to the foundation of the whole thing in the first place. My brother Alfred, you work with Punch. As you are today, if somebody shoots my brother and you are there right in your face where the person was shot, if you are told to report and the owner of Punch told your guy said how you're not shoot up, that's what you will say. You don't have the choice. You don't have the power to make any choice. Mind you, the owner of Punch himself, see us that controlling him over there with money. So see, this whole thing is too deep than just picking it from, oh, don't sanction the media. And my brother Bright, when you talk about we should not sanction media, I think I disagree a little bit with the idea of free press. The question is there anything like freedom in the first place? I've always loved to ask question from people. Does the word freedom actually exist? In the concept of what we all know freedom to be, does it actually exist? Here in America,
hello, Comrade Oluwasegun, please,
yes, sir.
Just briefly, let me react to some of the things you've said. These are really existential questions. And I mean, in philosophy, some of these things are deeper. You just ask yourself that freedom itself, do we actually have freedom? I'm not talking about press freedom now. Do we have freedom? I mean, we are a prisoner of survival. And by the time you subject this to scrutiny and all of that, but the media, I understand, is funded by different set of persons, different interests. But I think there should be a point where the interest of the people and the interest of media owners meet. Yeah, that's yes, fine. We have state-owned media. For instance, look at the communist countries where we have state-owned media there. They are doing what they are doing. And when we compare some of these organizations that are owned by individuals, some are still doing better. When we bring it back home, we still have organizations that are doing better, and we know the bad ones. So the ability for us to discern between the good and the bad as individuals, why not just decide that, okay, since you know that this platform is bad, why don't you stop listening to the platform?
Thank you very much.
And go to I'm just saying that this is an open-ended. This is an open-ended discussion.
Yes,
you get it.
With you, sir. I'm with you 100%. I'm with you 100%.
This is a conversation that, of course, has no hand in sight. I want us to quickly talk about how these whole crises affect Africa, and what does it mean for Africa? And I know Comrade Segun wants to go first, but I'll allow Comrade Kazim. I saw his hand raised up. So Comrade Kazim will quickly give his thoughts on what he wanted to say, and then he would lead us in on how this entire crisis affects Africa. I hope we still have Dr. Johnson for 1 minute so that he can share his perspective as well. You have the floor, Comrade Kazim.
Thank you, Comrade Ayla. I was raising hand to just quickly raise, because I sympathize with what Olusegun is, the point is trying to raise. If we start from, they are not allowing press to be free, this one, we're assuming that it can be achieved. That is what they call illusion. We are building an illusion in the mind of the people that there's a possibility that one day there will be an unbiased press freedom, it will be free, it will be independent. This is absolutely impossible in a society that is already divided into classes, to interest, not just interest, conflicting interests that are diametrically opposed to each other. The more they get rich, the poorer the people get. Money does not fall from heaven. When you have people becoming, we have richest man in Nigeria, that means Nigeria is probably going to also at the same time be one of the poorest section of the society. It's either way. You know, when one gets big, the other one gets small, thinner. When you have big US, you have satellite countries everywhere that they have to exploit for that wealth to be maintained. So when society is already divided into this kind of classes, it's absolutely impossible to have that kind of freedom of this, freedom of that. But I don't share the pessimism that there's nothing we can do. I think that's why I quickly raise up the hand. We shouldn't, as a result of this, now appear completely helpless. And that's why I said, our comrades in Russia, we have seen what they can do. In UK, we have seen anti-war movement also developing against NATO. These are things that for now, I think it's important for us to put all our attention into this. What does it mean for Africa? We have seen the price of oil just up. Unfortunately, we are living in a country that is completely contradictory. When the crude oil price go up, the regime will say they are paying much more for subsidy, and therefore it's a much more pain for them. We have seen what it actually means, that what that contradiction means. Nigeria and other African countries, they are just a satellite to NATO. They respond to dictates of whatever NATO. That's why we are not surprised that some are even, when you listen to our own channel, TV, listen to Nigerian narratives, you see them towing and also emphasizing Ukraine are solving this, are solving that, without going into the detail of giving us full explanation of what is really going on. Allow us to go through all the lies that have, clearly occupied the whole space. They are not doing that well because they are just mere satellites of the NATO. And our responsibility in Nigeria too, if there's any need for us to also organize ourselves and force our government to do something, is to hands off. It's not for escalation of this war. It's not to be behind any of these, hooligans, who are parading themselves as imperialist interests. And that's exactly how I see it in relation to the African. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll let Bright go, and then we'll have Comrade Shegun to give us his perspective on how this affects Africa.
Okay, so now the significance of all this to Africa, I want us to look at it from two perspectives. First of all, the economic. Now, the fact that there is a threat of what I will call a clash of civilization between the East and the West now can create a ripple effect of economic depression. Now, as much as you would condemn capitalism in the US, condemn capitalism in the UK, condemn communist China or something, now you have to understand that these countries, in case of any economic depression, they have the capacity to at least provide palliative for their people. Now, if there's an economic crisis, what is going to be the destiny of those of us in Africa? You can see during COVID how our politicians were ordering palliatives. Now imagine if there is a crisis, a full-blown economic crisis as a result of this war. The fact is that the US, the UK, China, and the likes, they have the capacity, they have the state capacity to at least provide, even though it is superficial, provide superficial succor to their people, and then they could navigate the problem. But here in Africa, African countries don't have such capacities. So in the case of any full-blown economic crisis, we are the ones that would bear the brunt of it. The poor man in America will obviously bear the brunt, but not as a poor man in Africa. So we are still the biggest loser in case this goes into economic depression. Now, the second thing is that at a time it asks, this crisis at a time raises the question of what to be done to secessionist movements. There's an argument of states should maintain their sovereignty. People should have their right to determination. And then there's an argument of no, the country should also, the stronger countries should also be able to defend their territorial interests. So the way this crisis is going to be resolved is going to have a large say on how secessionist movements in Africa will be treated. Now, if the consensus at the end of this crisis is that secessionism should be crushed, trust me, African governments, who many of them are lapdogs of the West, would go full force and crush secessionist movement. Now, if this crisis ends with the fact that secessionist movement is right, then you will have a case where foreign actors will start working actively to further destabilize African countries. So, and that is the two major problems that we have, that the way this war is going to be resolved is going to determine a lot in the future of how these two questions will be answered in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very brilliant perspective, Comrade Bright. Comrade Shegun, let us have you.
Thank you very much. Let me pick it from where Comrade Bright stopped. When he talked about the effect of the war on African economy. But here is my own perspective, though. Yes, we're going to be affected. But to an average African, let me come down to Nigeria, where we all come from. To an average Nigerian, do you really think this will affect us? What is really affecting us as Nigerians right now, economically, is our inability to produce, in my own opinion. Because right now, I'm not seeing what the government is doing for anybody. You are producing your life by yourself. You are producing your own security. You are producing your own water. You are virtually doing virtually almost everything by yourself. The only thing we are not doing in Nigeria right now is agriculture. And this is having a ripple effect on our day-to-day feeding. I remember when I was serving in Anambra State, in a village called Umewelu. Most of my students back then, all of them, virtually almost all of them, are not ready to stay in that village to farm. They want to go to the city. They want to go to Lagos, go to Onitsha, and live Lagos life, city life. Because why? We've been able to show them that the life, their lifestyle in that village is worthless. This is where I'm going to. I'm actually looking at this from a more deeper perspective. Are we going to be affected economically as a country? Yes. But as an individual in Nigeria today, can we still survive without feeling much effect of this world issue? Yes, if we go back to production, if we go out to making our things by our own self. In my own opinion, that is the only way we will not feel much of this effect of this issue. But as far as we still remain with the same mindset of being helped, being given to, being imported into, then we are finished. Thank you. That's my opinion.
Right. Thank you very much for that very brilliant perspective as well.
I'll be brief. I'll be brief.
Please go ahead.
I'm looking at it. They've talked about the economic aspect of it, and Bright has given us a deeper view. But I'm looking at it from this perspective. This situation is setting a bad precedent. You mentioned the shutdown of some Russian media organizations, and I mean the Buhari regime that we have already is taking note of situations that can warrant shutting down the media. You know, when we do things in Africa, we go the extreme way. So, and they will always have a backing to justify whatever they are doing. That's one. And on the other side, I'm looking at gun violence. The Ukrainian government has started giving arms. I mean, NATO forces are now supplying Ukraine with arms and ammunition. Where is this ammunition going to after an agreement is signed? We need to ask ourselves, because don't let us forget what happened in Libya. The situation in Libya is one of the things that we are battling on in terms of banditry, terrorism, because they smuggle these guns, this ammunition from Libya through Agadez. It gets to Niger Republic. It enters Nigeria from Niger Republic, and you know, this. Our own security is very porous. We don't have that number of security operatives that can help us. So when the war is over, or crisis as some quarters call it, where is this gun going to? Where are these ammunition going to? That's very
They are
critical.
coming to Africa. They are coming to Africa.
I don't want to
argue.
Mr. Shegun said they are coming to Africa. Because I'm very sure they will be cheap and we like affordable guns. Everybody wants to own a gun, so this is an opportunity.
And we love to kill
Thanks very
ourselves
much.
too. We love to kill ourselves. So we happily
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alfred, for that very, very important question. We are also now joined, even though we are at the twilight of this conversation, but we are joined by a very, very respected fellow, also a senior correspondent at Punch newspapers and a long-standing member of the Revolution Now movement. Abiodun Sanusi, welcome to this conversation. We've spoken about a number of things when you were not here, and I don't know which of them you would like to quickly give us your thoughts, the summary of your thoughts in 1 or 2 minutes. We've spoken about shutting off Russian television stations or newspapers in guise of calling them propaganda stations. We've related that to the attack on press freedom. If that in itself is not an attack on press freedom, we have spoken about how the media has underreported the crisis that has lasted for 8 years and has thrown all its weight around the invasion that happened 2 weeks ago. I think we have also spoken about how this crisis and what it means for the working people. So do you quickly want to give us your thoughts on those, Abiodun? If you are speaking, you would have to unmute. I don't think.
Okay. Good evening. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. Good evening. I'm actually at a press conference. I just finished. I'm sorry to have delayed. Also, I'm sorry for coming late. Yeah, I overheard. I don't know that man on a headset.
Is it possible for you to help us turn on your video?
My video. All right. Let me do that. Okay. Okay, yeah, I'm here. So I listened to the man on the headset, and it was surprising that while here in the midst of other journalists, I heard him defending the clampdown on the freedom of information and on the freedom of the press. He was saying that why do we think the press should have freedom? And it's just funny. It's funny that in 2022, anyone will think that the press should not be free, especially considering the fact that we live in a supposedly democratic country. Even if Vladimir Putin would never.
Sorry, comrade. I don't think that Mr. Shegun said that the press should not be free. He didn't make any of such statements.
No,
If I understood him clearly, he was only saying or explaining that the press freedom as we refer to it, is an illusion, owing to the fact that we do not control the press, and that even the people that emphasize on press freedom do not actually have the capacity to enforce press freedom. It doesn't matter how much we think press freedom should be. The people who fund the press control what the press says or the bias of the press. I think that's pretty much his argument. He didn't say that press freedom should not be. You may proceed, please.
Oh, thank you, Ayo. Thank you for that. That's cool then, if that was his argument, because what I heard when I joined was what I was responding to. That's fine. So, well, sorry. You said they're going to the mainland, right? Let me join. Yeah, so
We cannot hear you.
You are muted. You are muted. Socialist, you are muted.
Yeah, can you hear me now, please?
Yes, please. Go.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
No problem.
Hello? Oh.
Go ahead. We can hear you.
We can hear
All
you.
right.
We can hear you.
I'm sorry. I was just leaving an event. So, yeah. Yeah, talking about the issue of the press as it relates to the Russian Ukrainian crisis. I wouldn't call it a war, and that is considering the fact that I'm kind of biased towards the European Eastern Europe, compared to loving the West. But I'm sorry, you were here.
I mean, so socialist, it's okay if you're not.
Yeah. The media in times of crisis. It's a wonderful discussion. And although we can't categorically say what the effect of the media during the Nigerian Biafran War, but of course, all of us here on this Zoom meeting could state or could explain the effect of the media during the NSAS protest in 2020. We could say, the failings. We could talk about the failings of the media, and also talked about the good side of the media.
I think we are losing Abiodun. Comrade Kazim, I know you want to leave. We spent more than an hour. Right. We spent more than an hour on this conversation, and I will just quickly say that we should give our closing statement. I wonder who wants to go first. Comrade Kazim, do you? Then I would have Alfred and Bright, and then Commissioner.
Please, let me quickly go. No doubt it's been a very interesting discussion so far. It's really, really gladdening that we have gone beyond all the trouble that we face in this country and look at what is going on globally. I feel really, really excited about this. But in each of these situations, when we look at what is going on in Ukraine, the humanitarian crisis that's already developing, the sanction placed on Russia and what it will mean to them, the whole global economy that is certainly going to get crashing in the coming period, you then remember what Lenin said, that capitalism is horror without end. For as long as this system still survives, we have not seen the end of this horror that is bringing. The main task that is standing before us, my generation and the coming generation, and several generations that will come, is to put an end to this blood-sucking system and put in place a much more humane system, that is run on the basis of our needs and not on the basis of the profit of very, very minute individuals. And it's only on the basis of that we can get ourselves free up from this kind of horror. No matter how much you want to cry about it, you cannot, survive experiencing this once in a while. When it gives us a respite, it's to make life difficult only at home, peacefully. And then once in a while, it comes to the public like this, and we see horror, the true nature of this system. And please, comrades, we are organizing, and we really, really want to appeal to everyone to join us in organizing to put an end to this horror. Thank you, comrades, for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much for your very brilliant contributions, comrade. Please let me have Comrade Shegun for his closing statement, if he has one.
Oh, I'm really sorry, guys. I have to really dash away to something with my family. All I can say is this. I only want to give an advice to every one of us, everyone listening. If you really love Nigeria or Africa as a whole, and you hope for anything better to happen for that country, don't expect anything from a large group of people. It will not work. That's my own opinion. If it's going to be any organization to save our continent or to save our country, I believe it will only happen when a selected few that can generate the resources they need to make it happen when they come together. Until that time, I wish us good luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me have Alfred, and then we have Bright, and then we can call it a wrap on the conversation.
Yes, I won't take much of our time. It brings to fore the issues surrounding colonialism. I mean, what we call neo-colonialism. And I want to take solace words of this UN ambassador, Kenyan ambassador to the UN. And he said, we have to stop this by all means. It's not about who is right or who is wrong, but there's this desperate move by the superpowers to usurp power in different parts of the countries. I've forgotten the word Dr. Jide Johnson used for it. So this quest to annex, this quest to conquer a nation and add it to it, I mean, it does not end. And if we continue this way, I'm very sure Nigeria will soon annex our brother, Niger Republic. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Alfred. Bright, please.
Yeah. So conclusively, I think the crisis of the past 2 weeks brings a major question of the fact that are nations really sovereign? Obviously, the kind of agreement we know now of sovereign nations, even though we call them sovereign, but in reality, are they really sovereign? Are some countries not sovereign more than the other? That is, the interest of some countries are sovereign more than the other. The interest of America is sovereign more than the interest of the people in Cuba and Venezuela and other countries in the Americas. The interest of Russia is the interest of Russia is more sovereign than the interest of a Georgian or a Ukrainian. Now, those are the questions that this crisis has brought to the fore, and then we need to start questioning the whole international order. That is everything really not based on a charade and a lie and deception? I think these are the questions we need to ask. Conclusive. That's the question that at the end of this crisis, even no matter how they are going to resolve it, we are still going to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to everyone for your very, very warm and brilliant contributions. I must say that it's been a very educative conversation. Once again, we have had Alfred Olufemi from Punch Newspapers. We've had Abiodun Sanusi from Punch Newspapers. Comrade Shegun Ogunshaki joining us from the United States. We have Ogundare Bright. We've had Dr. Jide Johnson from the Nigerian Institute of Journalism. We've had Comrade Kazim from the Campaign for Workers Alternative, I think. Very, very brilliant people, very, very brilliant conversation. Thank you so much indeed for joining. You leave me in no doubt of your position on this matter, and it's been really interesting talking to you. I hope that when next we get to see like this, we have a more elaborate conversation. Thank you very much for joining. And that would be all for you, my viewers, on this edition of today's conversations with me. It's been very beautiful bringing this episode to you, and I hope that you join us in 2 weeks for conversation around another very interesting and very beautiful topic. It's been beautiful being your host. My name is Ayola Babalola, and I'll see you next week.